The shot rang out through the canyon, echoing like thunder as Rose Gallagher's horse reared in panic, nearly sending her tumbling into the raging river 20 feet below. The recent spring floods had transformed the normally placid creek into a roaring monster that had claimed the eastern half of the rickety wooden bridge connecting her family's ranch to the nearest town. She clutched the reins tightly, her heart pounding as she spotted the figure on horseback across the ravine. "Stay back, madam," the man's voice carried across the water. "That bridge won't hold." Rose steadied her mare and squinted through the bright Montana sunshine of 1876. The stranger sat tall on a chestnut stallion, his face shadowed by a well-worn Stetson. She'd never seen him before, which wasn't surprising. Strangers had been flooding into the territory since the railroad had pushed through last year. "I need to cross," she called back, desperation edging her voice. "My father's ill, and I must fetch the doctor from town." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, approaching the bridge cautiously. Up close, Rose could see he was young, perhaps 25 or so, with sun-bronzed skin and alert blue eyes that assessed the damaged structure with practiced precision. "Name's Zachary Bridges," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "though folks just call me Zach." "Rose Gallagher," she replied, still seated atop her nervous horse. "Please, I don't have time." Zach stepped onto the bridge, testing a plank with his boot. The wood groaned ominously, and he quickly retreated. "The bridge was too weak to cross," the cowboy said, looking up at her. "Then we'll build another together." Rose blinked, taken aback. "Build another? That would take days. My father needs help now, not a permanent one," Zach explained, already scanning the nearby trees. "A temporary crossing, just enough to get you over." "Then I'll ride for the doctor while you head back to your pa." Rose dismounted, her skirts billowing around her ankles as she approached the edge of the broken bridge. "Why would you help a stranger like this?" Zach's smile transformed his weathered face. "Out here, strangers are just friends you haven't met yet." He glanced at the sky. "Besides, looks like rain's coming. Best we hurry." Within minutes, Zach had assessed their situation and formulated a plan. They would use fallen timber to reinforce the remaining bridge sections, creating a narrow but stable path just wide enough for a person to cross on foot. Rose watched as he worked, his movements efficient and purposeful. Despite her worry for her father, she couldn't help but admire the cowboy's calm competence. "Where are you headed?" she asked as she gathered smaller branches at his direction. "Nowhere in particular," Zach replied, dragging a substantial log toward the bridge. "Was riding with a cattle drive-up from Texas, but the trail boss and I had a disagreement about how to treat the horses. I don't abide cruelty to animals." Rose nodded, respecting his principles. "And now, heard there's work at the Silver Dollar Ranch. Thought I'd try my luck there." He paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Your family's place far from here, Gallagher Creek Ranch, about 2 miles east," Rose said, pointing across the ravine. "It's not much, but it's ours, or it will be if we can hold on to it." Zach gave her a questioning look, but didn't pry further. Instead, he focused on securing the logs across the damaged section of bridge. As they worked together, the threatening clouds drew closer, bringing with them the distant rumble of thunder. "We need to hurry," Rose said, anxiety creeping back into her voice. "Father's fever was high when I left." "Almost there," Zach assured her. After another 20 minutes of intense labor, he stepped back to examine their handiwork. "It won't win any beauty contests, but it should hold for one crossing." Rose gathered her skirts and prepared to cross, but Zach placed a hand on her arm. "Let me test it first," he insisted. Before she could protest, he was carefully making his way across their makeshift bridge, testing each step before committing his full weight. The logs creaked and shifted slightly, but held firm. When he reached the other side, he turned back to her with a triumphant smile. "See, solid as a rock. Now you come across nice and slow." Rose hesitated only a moment before gathering her courage. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the jerry-rigged crossing. The wood groaned beneath her feet, and the rushing water below made her dizzy, but she kept her eyes fixed on Zach, drawing strength from his encouraging nods. When she finally reached the other side, her relief was so profound that she nearly collapsed. Zach caught her elbow, steadying her. Thank you, she breathed, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Don't thank me yet, he replied, stepping back respectfully. We still need to get that doctor. Where's your horse? Rose pointed to where her mare stood tethered to a tree. Her name is Daisy. Well then, Miss Rose, you take Daisy and head straight home to your father. I'll ride to town for the doctor. But you don't know the way, Rose protested. Just point me in the right direction, Zach said, already mounting his stallion. What's the doctor's name? Dr. Williams. His office is on Main Street, across from the Mercantile. Rose bit her lip. But I can't ask you to, you're not asking, I'm offering. Zach settled into his saddle. Now go on home to your pa, I'll bring the doctor as quick as I can. With a tip of his hat, he was gone, riding hard toward town. Rose watched him disappear around a bend in the trail before mounting Daisy and heading for home. Her mind filled with thoughts of her ailing father and the mysterious cowboy who had appeared when she needed help most. The Gallagher Creek Ranch was modest by Montana standards, a sturdy log cabin with a barn, corral, and a few outbuildings nestled in a small valley. As Rose approached, she noticed smoke rising from the chimney, which meant her younger brother Thomas was keeping the fire going as she'd instructed. Rose, Thomas called, running from the house as she dismounted. At 16, he was tall and lanky with their mother's auburn hair and their father's determined chin. Did you bring the doctor? He's coming, Rose said, hurrying toward the house. How's father? Thomas's face clouded. Not good. He's been asking for mother. Their mother had passed away 3 years earlier, a fact that made Thomas's words all the more concerning. Rose rushed inside to find her father lying on his bed, his face flushed with fever. Patrick Gallagher had always been a strong man, but the illness had reduced him to a shadow of himself. Father, Rose said softly, sitting beside him and taking his hand. His eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. Mary, is that you? No, father, it's Rose. She placed a cool cloth on his forehead. The doctor is coming. Just hold on a little longer. For the next hour, Rose tended to her father while Thomas kept watch outside for the doctor. When the sound of hoofbeats finally approached the cabin, Rose felt a surge of relief so powerful it nearly brought tears to her eyes. They're here, Thomas called, flinging the door open. Dr. Williams bustled in, medical bag in hand, with Zach following close behind. The doctor immediately went to Patrick's bedside, while Zach hung back, hat in hand, water dripping from his duster, evidence that he'd ridden through the rain that was now drumming steadily on the cabin's roof. You made it, Rose said, moving to stand beside him. Thank you. Zach shrugged modestly. Wasn't nothing. Doc here was already preparing to ride out this way for his regular visits. Still, I'm grateful. Rose hesitated, then added, You're soaked through. Let me get you some coffee while the doctor works. In the small kitchen area, Rose busied herself with the coffee pot while keeping one eye on her father. Zach settled himself at the rough-hewn table, his presence filling the modest cabin in a way that should have felt intrusive, but somehow didn't. Nice place you got here, he commented, looking around appreciatively. It's not much, Rose replied, setting a steaming mug before him, but it's been home since I was 12. Father moved us out here from St. Louis after Mother died. Must have been hard, starting over like that. Rose nodded, her gaze drifting to where Thomas hovered anxiously near their father's bedside. It was. Father knew nothing about ranching, but he learned. We all did. And now, Zach asked, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. Rose hesitated, unsure why she felt compelled to share their troubles with this stranger. Perhaps it was the genuine interest in his eyes, or simply the need to voice the worries that had been weighing on her for months. Now we're struggling, she admitted quietly. The bank in town holds our mortgage. We've got 3 months to make payment or we lose everything. Zach's brow furrowed. That's a tough spot. No other family to help, none, it's just us now. Rose glanced toward her father, and with father ill, before Zach could respond, Doctor. Williams approached, wiping his hands on a cloth. Pneumonia, he announced grimly. It's taken hold of his lungs. I've given him something for the fever, but he needs constant care. Rose's heart sank. Will he recover? Hard to say, the doctor replied. He's strong, but not young. The next few days will tell. He turned to Zach. Thank you for fetching me so promptly, young man. Zach nodded respectfully. Just doing what needed doing, doctor. Williams packed his bag and left instructions for Patrick's care: regular doses of medicine, plenty of fluids, and keeping him warm but not overheated. As he prepared to leave, the rain outside intensified, becoming a downpour punctuated by crashes of thunder. "You're welcome to wait out the storm here, Doctor," Rose offered. Dr. Williams shook his head. "I've got other patients to see. I'll manage." He glanced at Zach. "You heading back to town?" "I was," Zach said, looking out the window at the deluge, "but I'm in no hurry." After the doctor departed, an awkward silence fell. Rose was acutely aware that propriety dictated she shouldn't have an unknown man in their home, especially with her father incapacitated. Yet the thought of sending Zach out into the storm seemed equally wrong. Thomas solved her dilemma. "You can stay in the barn if you want," he offered. "It's dry and there's plenty of hay for bedding." Zach looked to Rose for confirmation, and she nodded gratefully. "It seems the least we can offer after your help today." "Much obliged," Zach said. "And if you don't mind, I could tend to your stock while I'm there. Give you and your brother time with your pa." Rose accepted his offer, and as Zach headed out to the barn, she felt an unexpected sense of security knowing he was nearby. The afternoon faded into evening, with Rose and Thomas taking turns sitting with their father, whose condition remained unchanged. When Thomas insisted on taking the night watch, Rose reluctantly agreed to get some rest. She was awakened before dawn by the smell of coffee and bacon. Confused, she emerged from her small bedroom to find Zach in the kitchen, cooking breakfast as though he'd done it 100 times before. "Hope you don't mind," he said when he noticed her. "Thought you and your brother could use a hot meal." "I thank you," Rose stammered, suddenly conscious of her rumpled appearance. She quickly excused herself to splash water on her face and tidy her hair before returning to the kitchen. Thomas was already at the table, devouring a plate of food with the enthusiasm of a growing boy. "Zach says he can help us with the chores today," he announced between bites. "Says he doesn't mind staying another day or so." Rose glanced at Zach questioningly. "What about the Silver Dollar Ranch? I thought you were looking for work." "It'll still be there next week," Zach replied, sliding a plate toward her. "And it looks like you could use an extra pair of hands right now." Rose wanted to refuse, pride demanded it, but practicality won out. With her father ill and spring planting approaching, they were already behind on the ranch work. "We can't pay you," she warned. Zach's easy smile returned. "Wasn't asking for payment, just a place to lay my head and meals when work allows." And so began an arrangement that was meant to last a few days, but stretched into weeks. Patrick Gallagher's recovery was slow but steady, and Zach proved himself invaluable around the ranch. He mended fences, helped with the planting, and even broke a spirited colt that Thomas had been struggling with. More than once, Rose found herself watching Zach as he worked, admiring the quiet confidence with which he approached each task. He never complained, even when the work was backbreaking, and he treated Thomas with a respect that the boy clearly treasured. "Your brother's a quick study," Zach commented one evening as they sat on the porch after supper. The air was cool and sweet with the scent of pine, and fireflies had begun to dance in the gathering dusk. "He's had to grow up fast," Rose replied, her hands busy with mending. "Father's illness has been hard on him." "Hard on both of you," Zach observed. Rose nodded, not trusting her voice. The weight of responsibility sometimes felt crushing the ranch: her father's health, Thomas's future, the looming mortgage payment. She'd been carrying it alone for so long that she scarcely remembered what it felt like to be unburdened. "You know," Zach said carefully, "I've been thinking about that bridge." Rose looked up, surprised by the change of subject. "What about it?" "It was a temporary fix, what we did that day, but the creek needs a proper crossing, especially if you're going to get your cattle to market this fall." "We can't afford to hire anyone to build it," Rose said, the familiar worry creeping back into her voice. "Didn't say anything about hiring." Zach leaned forward, his expression animated. "I've helped build a few bridges in my time. With the right materials and some help from you and Thomas, we could do it ourselves." Rose stared at him, torn between hope and suspicion. "Why would you do that? You barely know us." Zach was quiet for a moment, his gaze steady. "Maybe I want to know you better." The simple statement hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that Rose wasn't sure she was ready to acknowledge. She lowered her eyes to her sewing, her cheeks warm. "Besides," Zach continued, his tone lightening, "I promised, didn't I, said we'd build another bridge together." Rose remembered his words on that first day, a promise made to a stranger in distress. "You did," she agreed softly. "Then it's settled," Zach said, as if that concluded the matter. "We'll start tomorrow, weather permitting." True to his word, Zach began work on the bridge the next day. He and Thomas rode into the hills to select suitable timber, while Rose tended to her father and the daily chores. When they returned, Zach spent the evening sketching plans at the kitchen table, explaining each element to an eager Thomas. Rose watched them, a lump in her throat. It had been a long time since she'd seen her brother so animated, so engaged. Despite her misgivings about accepting so much help from Zach, she couldn't deny the positive effect his presence was having on their small family. The bridge project progressed steadily over the following days. Zach proved to be as skilled a builder as he was a cowboy, directing the work with confidence while patiently teaching Thomas the finer points of construction. Even Patrick, now well enough to sit outside for short periods, took an interest in the project, offering advice from his chair on the porch. One afternoon, as Rose brought water to the workers, she found Zach standing knee-deep in the creek, securing a support beam. The spring sun glinted off the water and highlighted the contours of his face as he concentrated on his task. Something about the scene, his strength, his focus, his dedication to helping them made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't experienced before. When Zach looked up and caught her watching, his smile was warm enough to chase away the creek's chill. "Come see what we've done," he called, extending a hand to help her navigate the slippery rocks. Rose hesitated only briefly before setting down the water jug and accepting his hand. His grip was firm and reassuring as he guided her across the partially completed structure. Standing in the middle of the bridge, with the water flowing beneath and Zach's hand still holding hers, Rose felt a curious sense of possibility opening before her, like a door she hadn't known existed. "It's going to be beautiful," she said, surveying the work. "Strong, too," Zach assured her. "This bridge will stand for years." The conviction in his voice made Rose wonder if he was still talking about the bridge. When she met his gaze, the intensity she found there confirmed her suspicion. For a breathless moment, they stood together, connected by more than just their clasped hands. Then Thomas's shout broke the spell. "Zach, I need help with this beam." Zach released her hand, but his eyes held hers a moment longer. "We'd better get back to it," he said softly. As April gave way to May, life at Gallagher Creek Ranch fell into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. Patrick continued to improve, gradually resuming light duties around the ranch. Thomas flourished under Zach's tutelage, growing in confidence and skill. And Rose found herself looking forward to the quiet evenings when chores were done, and the four of them would gather on the porch, talking and sometimes singing as the stars appeared overhead. Yet beneath this newfound contentment ran the constant current of worry about the mortgage. No matter how hard they worked, the payment deadline loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. Rose knew that, without a miracle, they would lose everything they'd fought so hard to build. One evening, as she and Zach walked back from checking on a pregnant mare, Rose finally voiced the fear that had been gnawing at her. "We're not going to make it, are we?" she said, stopping to gaze out over their land, silvered by moonlight. "Even with the bridge finished and the cattle healthy, we won't have enough by July." Zach was quiet for a long moment. "There's talk of a new railroad spur coming through," he finally said. "They're paying good money for right-of-way access." Hope flared briefly in Rose's chest, then died. "Not on our land. The survey crew was through last month. They're running the line 5 miles west." "There might be another way," Zach said carefully. "I heard the Silver Dollar's hiring hands for a big cattle drive to Wyoming. Pays good, real good." "But that would mean leaving the ranch," Rose pointed out. "Father's better, but he's not strong enough to manage without help." "I wasn't thinking of your father going," Zach said. "I was thinking of me." Rose stared at him, confused. "You." "But why would you? I'd give you the wages," Zach explained, his expression earnest in the moonlight. "All of it. Enough to make that payment with some left over. The offer left Rose speechless. When she finally found her voice, it was thick with emotion. "Zach, I can't let you do that." "It's too much." "It's not," he insisted, stepping closer. "Rose, these past weeks, being here with you and your family, it's meant something to me, more than I can say." Rose's heart thundered in her chest as Zach reached for her hands, enfolding them in his own. "I know it's fast," he continued, "and maybe I'm overstepping, but I care for you, Rose. I care for all of you. Let me help." Tears pricked at Rose's eyes. No one had offered such selflessness, such kindness, since her mother died. The temptation to accept was overwhelming, but so was the fear of depending so completely on someone who could ride away as easily as he had ridden in. "What if you change your mind?" she whispered, voicing her deepest fear. "What if you decide we're not worth it?" Zach's hands tightened around hers. "Not possible," he said simply. Something in his voice, absolute certainty, broke through Rose's defenses. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat, and Zach pulled her gently into his arms. As she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Rose allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, they had found a way forward. The following morning, Zach rode for the Silver Dollar Ranch to inquire about the cattle drive. He returned that evening with news both good and troubling. "They're taking on hands," he confirmed as they gathered around the supper table. "Drive leaves in 3 days, heading for the railhead in Cheyenne. Pays even better than I heard, $5 a day, plus a bonus if we make good time." Patrick whistled low. "That's mighty generous. Too generous," Zach agreed, his expression grave. "There's a reason for it. The drive's crossing Blackfoot territory." A tense silence fell over the table. Relations with the Blackfoot had been strained in recent years as white settlers pushed further into their traditional lands. While outright violence was rare, cattle drives were particularly vulnerable to harassment or theft. "Is it dangerous?" Thomas asked, his young face alight with a mixture of concern and excitement. "Could be," Zach admitted. "But the trail boss says they've negotiated safe passage with the tribal leaders, paid a fee for crossing their hunting grounds." "That doesn't always mean safety," Patrick said soberly. "I've known men who thought they had agreements, only to find out different when it was too late." Rose studied Zach's face, searching for any sign of hesitation. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "We'll find another way." Zach's eyes met hers, steady and determined. "I'm going," he said simply. "The bridge will be finished tomorrow. I'll leave the day after." Despite Rose's protests, Zach remained firm in his decision. True to his word, the bridge was completed by sunset the next day. It stood solid and proud across the creek, a testament to Zach's skill and the family's collective effort. That evening, they celebrated with a special supper. Rose had used precious sugar to bake a cake, and Patrick brought out a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for a special occasion. The mood was festive yet tinged with melancholy, knowing that Zach would ride out at dawn. After supper, Thomas insisted on showing Zach a new trick he'd taught his dog, and Patrick retired early, leaving Rose to clear away the dishes. She worked methodically, using the familiar chores to keep her emotions in check. When Zach finally came in from the porch, she was drying the last plate, her back to the door. "Need any help?" he asked, his voice soft in the quiet kitchen. Rose shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. She heard Zach's boots on the wooden floor as he crossed to where she stood. "Rose," he said gently, "look at me." Reluctantly, she turned, keeping her eyes downcast until his finger beneath her chin tilted her face up. The tenderness in his expression nearly undid her. "I'll be back," he promised. 6 weeks, maybe 7. The drive will reach Cheyenne by late June, and I'll ride straight back with the money." 7 weeks is a long time," Rose whispered. Zach's hand cupped her cheek. "Not so long, and when I return, we'll talk about the future." "Our future, if you'll have me." Rose's breath caught. Though unspoken, the implication of his words was clear. He was offering her more than financial salvation, he was offering himself, a life together. "Zach, before she could finish, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, almost reverent, and over far too quickly. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "Think about it while I'm gone," he said. "That's all I ask." Rose nodded, unable to form words past the tide of feelings washing through her. Zach stepped back, his hands dropping to his sides. "I should get some sleep," he said. "Long ride tomorrow." As he turned to go, Rose found her voice. "Zach," he looked back, hope evident in his expression. "Be careful," she said softly. "Come back to us." His smile was warm and sure. Nothing could keep me away. Dawn broke clear and cool the next morning. Rose had barely slept, her mind filled with thoughts of Zach and the uncertain weeks ahead. She rose early to prepare a hearty breakfast and pack provisions for his journey. The parting was brief and subdued. Thomas, trying to be manly, shook Zach's hand firmly before impulsively hugging him. Patrick clasped his shoulder and thanked him, both men understanding what remained unsaid. And Rose, standing beside Zach's horse as he prepared to mount, felt as though her heart was being pulled in two directions. "I'll write when I can," Zach promised, securing the last of his gear. "Send letters to the general store in Cheyenne. We should arrive by the 3rd week of June." Rose nodded, memorizing his face as if she might forget it in the weeks to come, the strong line of his jaw, the crinkles at the corners of his eyes when he smiled, the way his hair curled at the nape of his neck. Zach swung into the saddle, then leaned down to take her hand one last time. "The bridge will stand," he said firmly, "and so will we." With that, he straightened, tipped his hat to the family, and rode away. Rose stood watching until he disappeared over the ridge, the new bridge carrying him safely across the creek and out of sight. The weeks that followed were filled with both hard work and anxious waiting. Spring blossomed into early summer, bringing with it the myriad tasks of ranch life. Rose threw herself into the work, using physical exhaustion to keep worry at bay. Her father continued to regain his strength, and Thomas stepped up admirably, taking on responsibilities beyond his years. Letters from Zach arrived sporadically, carried by travelers passing through Cheyenne and delivered to the local post office. Each one was a treasure that Rose read repeatedly, often by lamplight long after Thomas and her father had gone to sleep. Zach wrote of the cattle drive, the long days in the saddle, the camaraderie around the campfire, the stunning beauty of the open country. He mentioned skirmishes with Blackfoot scouts but assured her that the situation remained under control. His words were practical yet infused with feeling, especially when he wrote of his return. "I find myself counting the miles back to you," one letter read, "rather than the miles to Cheyenne." June arrived hot and dry. The cattle drive, according to Zach's most recent letter, was making good time and expected to reach Cheyenne within the week. Rose began to allow herself to hope, to imagine the relief of paying the mortgage and the joy of seeing Zach ride up to the ranch once more. Then disaster struck. It began with smoke on the horizon, a distant smudge against the blue sky that Patrick noticed as he and Thomas were checking fence lines. By midday, the smoke had thickened, and riders from neighboring ranches brought word. A wildfire was sweeping through the valley, driven by high winds. Rose and her family worked frantically to prepare. They soaked the roof and walls of the cabin and outbuildings, cleared brush from around the structures, and moved the livestock to the creek bottom where they might find safety in the water if necessary. By nightfall, the fire had reached the eastern boundary of their property. The sky glowed an eerie orange and ash drifted down like gray snow. Rose stood on the porch, watching in horror as flames leapt from tree to tree, devouring the dry pine forest with terrifying speed. "It's jumping the fire break," Patrick said grimly, joining her on the porch. "We need to be ready to evacuate." "But the ranch, everything we've worked for," Rose protested. Her father's face was resolute in the firelight. "Things can be rebuilt, lives can't." Through the night, they battled to save what they could. The wind shifted twice, bringing the fire perilously close before driving it back again. By dawn, exhaustion had set in, but the immediate danger had passed. The fire had skirted the main ranch buildings, though it had claimed the eastern pasture and a section of fence. Relief was short-lived. As they surveyed the damage in the gray morning light, Thomas let out a cry of dismay. "The bridge," he shouted, pointing toward the creek. Rose's heart sank as she followed his gesture. The bridge, Zach's bridge, their bridge was gone, reduced to charred supports jutting from the water like blackened bones. Embers must have caught it, Patrick said, his voice heavy with fatigue and disappointment. Wind was strong enough to carry them. Rose stared at the ruined crossing, a desolation deeper than physical exhaustion washing over her. The bridge had been more than a structure, it had been a symbol of hope, of Zach's promise to return. Now it lay in ruins, just as their future seemed to be crumbling around them. In the days that followed, they worked to repair what damage they could. The lost pasture eland was a significant blow, but not a fatal one. The livestock had survived, and the main house and barn were intact. Even so, Rose found it hard to summon optimism. The bank's deadline loomed less than 3 weeks away, and without the bridge, even if Zach returned with the promised money, he would face the same obstacle that had brought them together in the first place. A week after the fire, as Rose was hanging laundry in the yard, Thomas came running from the ridge where he'd been keeping watch for riders. "Rose, someone's coming," he called, excitement coloring his voice. 2 riders from the east, Rose's heart leapt. Could it be? She shaded her eyes, straining to see the approaching figures. One was mounted on a chestnut horse that looked familiar, even at a distance. The other rider was a stranger on a piebald mare. "It's Zach," Thomas confirmed, bouncing on his toes, "and someone else." Rose dropped the wet sheet she'd been about to hang and ran toward the ridge, her skirts gathered in her hands. By the time she reached the crest, the riders were close enough that she could see Zach's face, tired, dusty, but split in a wide grin when he spotted her. The riders stopped at the creek's edge, surveying the charred remains of the bridge. Rose watched as Zach dismounted and approached the water, his companion following. They conferred briefly, then Zach looked up, scanning the opposite bank until his gaze found her. "Rose." He called, his voice carrying across the water. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she called back. The fire spared the house and barn, relief visibly washed over Zach's face. He gestured to the ruined bridge. "Looks like we've got some rebuilding to do." Despite everything, the fire, the lost pasture, the looming mortgage, Rose felt laughter bubble up from some hidden well of joy. "I believe we do, Mr. Bridges." Zach grinned at her use of his full name, then turned to confer with his companion. After a moment, they both mounted up and rode along the creek bank until they found a shallow crossing point. Rose and Thomas hurried down to meet them as they emerged from the water on the ranch side. Up close, Zach looked even more travel-worn than Rose had first thought. His clothes were dusty, his face tanned dark by weeks in the sun, and there was a new scar along his jawline that hadn't been there before. But his eyes, when they met hers, were as warm and steadfast as she remembered. "Miss Rose," he said, dismounting and removing his hat. "I promised I'd come back." Before she could respond, he turned to introduce his companion. "This is Benjamin 2 Stars of the Blackfoot Nation. He guided us safely through his people's territory and decided to ride with me to Montana." Benjamin 2 Stars nodded respectfully. He was younger than Zach, perhaps 20, with intelligent eyes and a solemn demeanor. "The fire came close to your home," he observed. "You were fortunate." "Very," Rose agreed. She looked back to Zach. "Father will want to see you." "He's been resting in the shade by the barn." As they walked toward the ranch buildings, Zach fell into step beside Rose, their shoulders occasionally brushing. "I was worried when we saw the burned land," he said quietly. "Thought maybe we'd be too late." "Too late," Rose echoed. Zach patted his saddlebag. "Got the money, just like I promised. Enough for the mortgage and then some." The simple statement, delivered without fanfare, nearly brought Rose to tears. She had been so focused on the physical return journey that she'd almost forgotten the purpose of Zach's absence. "Zach, I thank you doesn't seem enough," he smiled down at her. "It's enough for now. We'll have time for more words later." Patrick's joy at seeing Zach was evident in the way he struggled to his feet, ignoring his lingering weakness to embrace the younger man. When Zach introduced Benjamin, explaining how the Blackfoot guide had helped navigate tense encounters with other tribal members, Patrick insisted that both men stay for a proper meal. That evening, as they gathered around the table, Zach recounted the cattle drive in greater detail. The journey had been arduous, with stampedes, river crossings, and several tense standoffs with Blackfoot warriors who disputed the agreed-upon payment for passage. "Benjamin here saved us more than once," Zach said, nodding toward the young Blackfoot man. "His father is a respected elder. When other warriors wanted to drive off our cattle, Benjamin spoke for us. My people have suffered enough conflict," Benjamin said simply. "There is no honor in breaking agreements." As the meal progressed, Zach produced a leather pouch from his jacket and placed it on the table before Patrick. $300, he said. "The bank's due payment with 50 extra." Patrick stared at the pouch, then at Zach, his weathered face working with emotion. "Son, I don't know how to thank you." "No need for thanks," Zach replied, "but I would like your blessing for something else." Rose felt her cheeks warm as Zach's gaze shifted to her. Patrick, not missing the look that passed between them, smiled knowingly. "I think I can guess what you're asking," he said, "and you've more than earned the right to ask it." Later, as the others retired for the night, Benjamin to the barn, Patrick and Thomas to their beds rose, and Zach found themselves alone on the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. "I've thought about this moment every day since I left," Zach said softly, taking her hands in his. "What I would say, how I would say it." Rose's heart fluttered. "And have you decided?" "I thought I'd be eloquent," Zach admitted with a rueful smile. "Turns out, when the moment comes, fancy words desert a man. Then use plain ones," Rose suggested, squeezing his hands encouragingly. Zach took a deep breath. "I love you, Rose Gallagher. I think I started falling for you the moment you refused to let that broken bridge stop you from helping your father. I love your courage, your strength, your devotion to your family. And I want to spend my life building things with you, not just bridges, but a home, a family, a future." Tears welled in Rose's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "I love you too, Zach. I think I've known it since the day you offered to help us, expecting nothing in return." Zach's smile was luminous in the starlight. "So will you marry me, Rose? Make a life with me here on this land you love so much?" "Yes," Rose whispered. "Yes, I will." Zach gathered her into his arms, his kiss sealing the promise between them. When they finally parted, both breathless and laughing softly, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "First thing tomorrow," he said, "we start rebuilding that bridge." True to his word, Zach began work on a new bridge at dawn. This time, he approached the project with even greater care, determined that this structure would withstand fire, flood, and whatever else nature might throw at it. Benjamin, who proved to have considerable experience with construction, offered valuable suggestions for improving the design. Over the next 2 weeks, the bridge took shape stronger, wider, and more beautiful than the first. Rose worked alongside Zach and Benjamin whenever she could spare time from her other duties, and Thomas threw himself into the project with renewed enthusiasm. On the day before they were to ride into town with the mortgage payment, Zach pronounced the bridge complete. The family gathered at the creek's edge for an informal dedication. Patrick, who had contributed his carpentry skills to the finishing touches, suggested they name it. "Every important bridge has a name," he declared. "What about Gallagher Bridge?" Thomas suggested. Patrick shook his head. "It should honor the builder. Bridges Bridge," Thomas said with a laugh. "That sounds silly." "What about Promise Bridge?" Rose suggested quietly. Zach's eyes met hers, understanding passing between them. "Perfect," he agreed. The next day, Zach and Rose rode into town together, crossing Promise Bridge with a sense of accomplishment and hope. At the bank, Rose watched with satisfaction as the mortgage was marked paid, securing their land for another year. Afterward, they visited the church to speak with the minister about their upcoming wedding. News of their engagement spread quickly through the small community. By the time they returned to the ranch, several neighbors had already ridden over to offer congratulations and, more practically, to help with preparations for the wedding, which was set for the following month. In the weeks that followed, life at Gallagher Creek Ranch transformed. Benjamin Two Stars, who had initially planned to stay only a few days, accepted Zach's offer of employment as a ranch hand. His knowledge of local wildlife and weather patterns proved invaluable, and his quiet presence added a balance to their household that seemed to have been missing. Patrick regained his strength, inspired by the prospect of his daughter's happiness and the promise of the ranch's future. Thomas thrived under the combined mentorship of Zach and Benjamin, developing skills that would serve him well as he grew into manhood. And Rose, watching it all unfold, felt a contentment she had thought lost forever after her mother's death. The ranch that had once felt like a burden now felt like the foundation of everything good in her life. On their wedding day in late July, Rose stood with Zach on Promise Bridge, the very spot where they had first connected. The minister conducted the ceremony there, with family, friends, and neighbors gathered on both banks of the creek to witness their union. As they exchanged vows, Rose thought of all that had transpired since that stormy April day when a broken bridge had brought Zach into their lives. The challenges they had faced, illness, financial strain, fire, separation, had only strengthened the bond between them. "I do," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the water as she promised to love, honor, and cherish Zachary Bridges for all the days of her life. "I do," Zach echoed, his eyes never leaving hers as he made the same solemn vow. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zach gathered Rose into his arms for a kiss that sealed their commitment before all present. Cheers erupted from both banks of the creek, and someone started playing a fiddle, the joyful music dancing on the summer air. Later, as the celebration continued at the ranch, Zach pulled Rose aside for a moment of quiet amidst the festivities. "Happy, Mrs. Bridges?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. Rose smiled up at him, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain such joy. "More than I ever thought possible," she assured him. Zach's expression grew serious for a moment. "That first day, when I told you we'd build another bridge together, I never imagined where it would lead. But standing here now, I know it was always meant to be this way, you and me, building a life together." Rose leaned into his embrace, savoring the strength and warmth of the man who was now her husband. "Some bridges," she said softly, "are meant to last forever." "Ours will," Zach promised, sealing his words with a kiss as the sun set over Promise Bridge, casting golden light on the waters that had once divided but now united their world. 5 years later, Promise Bridge still stood strong over Gallagher Creek, now expanded to accommodate wagons as well as riders and pedestrians. The Gallagher Creek Ranch, under the joint management of Zach and Rose Bridges, had prospered beyond their wildest dreams. The small herd of cattle had grown substantially, and they had added sheep and horses to their livestock. The cabin had been enlarged to accommodate their growing family, 3-year-old Mary, named for Rose's mother, and 1-year-old James, who had his father's blue eyes and determined chin. Rose's father, now gray but still active, lived in a comfortable addition to the main house, where he delighted in telling his grandchildren stories of the early days on the ranch. Thomas, now 21, had recently married the daughter of a neighboring rancher and was building his own home on the eastern edge of the property. Benjamin, 2 stars, had remained, becoming not just an employee but a trusted friend and advisor. His knowledge of the land and its ways had helped the ranch weather droughts and harsh winters that had ruined others in the territory. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Zach surprised Rose with a picnic by the creek, at the spot where Promise Bridge joined the 2 banks. As they sat on a blanket in the shade, watching their children play under the watchful eye of Patrick, Zach took Rose's hand. "Do you remember what I said to you that first day?" he asked. Rose smiled, the memory as clear as if it had happened yesterday. "The bridge was too weak to cross." "Then we'll build another together." Zach nodded, his eyes warm with love and pride. "Best promise I ever made." Rose leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her like the gentle current of the creek. "And kept," she added softly, "in more ways than one." As they sat together, watching the water flow beneath the bridge they had built with their own hands, Rose reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a chance meeting at a broken crossing to a life filled with love, family, and purpose, their story was woven into every plank, every nail, every moment of shared effort that had created not just a physical bridge, but a connection that spanned hearts and lives. "I love you, Zachary Bridges," she said, turning to meet his gaze. "And I love you, Rose Bridges," he replied, his voice deep with emotion. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the days that follow." Their lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of their shared past and the bright future that stretched before them, a future they would continue to build together, one day at a time.